Ladies and gentlemen, you have a real treat coming up because the absolutely amazing Andy Kaufman, Francie Rawlings, Laszlo Gong, Maria Matarel, Jennifer Tharp.
You have to be able to see the big picture. You have to have kind of a systems mindset.
We often don't think of those people. Like, who are those people that are going to impact us?
You have to do something different than the average person if you want to be a leader, right?
Ladies and gentlemen, I am delighted to introduce Jazz to you. She is probably one of the greatest opportunities to understand why project management is still something that is valid and pertinent and relevant. Because if somebody at this age who is listed as one of the top influencers in the project management community isn't a great example of how relevant this set of skills still is, I don't know who is. Thank you so much, Jazz, for joining us.
Hi, Kimi. Thank you so much for having me here and giving me the chance to actually join your show.
Well, I'm really excited because I think that many times people assume that they know what kinds of leadership lessons everybody has gone through and how that has related to project management. But what kind of leadership lessons have you had that made the most difference for you?
So I think it would be more about influencing your team and creating a certain kind of vibration, I would say. For example, setting the pace of your team performance, because sometimes some of the things you might not want to verbally say, but you want to, let's say, show the commitment that you're committed to delivering a certain goal, but you show it on your performance, so the team learns that behavior on how their project leader behaves. So I think there are some of the verbal style leadership, and some of the other leadership that comes into picture is more about how you behave and what kind of energy do you radiate.
So conducting yourself and leading by example.
Right.
Now, you have had an incredibly busy career. And as you've gone through that, you have dealt with many, many different teams and different types of organizations. Is there a challenge that you have found keeps cropping up regardless of what team you're with at the time and what organization you're serving at the moment?
Yes. So for most of the part of my career, like I worked for consultancy companies. So I did also work for a product company, but let's say like out of 6 years of my experience, I've been with like IT companies. So it's like a sales team would sell a project, and then we would get the project is handed over to the PM, and then the PM is responsible, for example, for delivering it. So a number of times, of course, I have run into the issue where, let's say, I would say lack of involvement of a project manager during the sales process. So for example, there is this fairy tale story that was sold to the client, and now the client has a certain set of expectations that the team is going to develop this out of world solution and within this much amount of time and this much amount of budget. So these are like the kind of problems that keep on occurring, or maybe that I don't think even in future these kind of problems are like going to take a step back. So I think more of about overselling the solution without project management involvement, or where the account manager, for example, might lack the technical skills, or overestimate or underestimate the amount of work. So that kind of issues, I face that over and over.
Oh dear, that's very sad because I faced that a great deal when I first started also. What what do you think has enabled you to deal with those kinds of things? Because you already can see that there are problems ahead. How do you deal with that without going nuts?
Well, I think one thing is that, of course, it can get to you, and you might feel it's part of me because there are people who are really serious about work. But I think slowly, what I have learned in my career is that there will always be problems. Just stay calm, just, look at the problem and see what you do. So, uh, my, so my top priority would always be client satisfaction, but I try to apply this Pareto's rule, right? 80-20. So basically, I'm just going to still ask the client, for example, what is their vision? Why are you, like, what is the why of a certain project, right? So basically, as long as I would meet that criteria on, for example, let's say a client wants to, let's say, automate their calling into the call center, like the operational workload can be decreased, let's say by 20% with the development of a system. And now let's say a sales team has sold that, okay, we will do this app, that app, with the integration of that app and whatsoever. So I think I'm going to ask, okay, what's your goal? And if I do have to tweak or make changes to the scope, or cut down and keep the most critical ones and deliver them first. There have been times where I did initiate, reframing the contract or getting things right. But in those kind of circumstances, it's not just about technical project management where you have to reframe on the scope, or within how are you going to tweak the scope of the project in order to still meet the client expectations but not burn out your team with unrealistic timeline. So in that kind of situation, let's say where the visibility, for example, on lack of clear vision, let's say from the client, or the detailed clear vision, I would say, because they would always have a very high level picture of what they want, but it might just not be very detailed, I would say. So I think in that kind of circumstances, it might be a bit difficult to keep your team together, because it can literally lower their morale or their productivity, or they might lose interest in sticking on to the project. So I think that's where the project manager has to come into picture and stick to having those decision-making skills. So and convince the stakeholders and influence them. So, yeah.
One of my favorite things about these interviews is the last question of the interview, because project management used to be an accidental profession. And now that it's a deliberate choice for so many people, and a field where there are standards of excellence and ideas that work more often than not. No idea works every time, unfortunately. My favorite thing to ask people who have made themselves notable not by a grand PR scheme, but because they achieve, because they're people of substance, is this: what do you suggest for people who are looking at you saying, I want to be able to achieve at that level. I want to be able to execute at that level. What suggestions do you have for those people?
So I think you're talking about on the technical project management level, or on the, which kind of target?
Thank you. Excellent clarification. I'd like to know what your advice would be on combining the technical part of project management and the leadership role of project management, because they're not separate.
Right. So definitely, I don't think you can just focus on the technical part of it without, caring at all about the people involved in it. So, so I think number one tip would be that sure that your account manager, or if, especially if you're in a consultancy company, let's say, if the project was sold a certain method, you need to maybe, for example, let's say, some of the projects might be sold, let's say, with a methodology saying that we would do agile, or we would do safe, or we would do a certain kind of methodology, and then the client actually doesn't know what, let's say, what it means, right? And then you check the feasibility of a certain methodology, if you can actually apply that to that project, if it will be successful or not, right? So the number one thing, I think, in every single project that I have seen, it is just winning your client's trust, so that they know that you care as a project manager. So I mean, those paperwork, that becomes secondary at some point, because as soon as they know that you care, and they have the confidence that you can deliver, I think the game's like in your control a lot. So you get like 90% of the game in your control. So then you can be very flexible on how you deliver the vision, as long as you just stick to delivering the goal of that project. So for example, let's say you might be facing challenges regarding the budgeting and whatsoever. So you can literally just break that down, for example, uh, per activity, or WBS, like what the traditional PM would do, right? And then cut down the scope from there, and you can have your must-haves, good to have, no need to have. So that's how I think it's about involving all the stakeholders, getting them on same page, and then get the game going from there. That's because most of the challenges that you will likely run into being a project manager, it will lead on, right? So one challenge or risk, if it was not determined properly, it will lead on to the next. So it's a lot more interconnected. So sure, the team performance, or setting the vibe, so that all comes along in this whatchamacallit, I would say, in this way. I don't know.
So it sounds to me like you invest time in building a sense of trust that with the client, so that they understand that how much you're invested and your team is invested by extension in their success. Um, and that's even before you start talking about the technical aspects of how to solve the problem that they've asked you in to resolve. But you're investing time and energy in establishing that trust and that relationship. Did I?
Right. Yes, that's exactly the point where I'm trying to get to, because at the end of the day, every project just involves people. They have a problem, they want a solution, right? So that is the meat, right? So if you get that trust, then you can solve a lot of problems. Let's say there is conflicting um, dates on deployment, then yeah, that happens, right? So let's say you're working with a very enterprise level. I don't know, right now I'm doing a banking project, so I know how hard it is to get the schedule approval. I would literally write email explaining reason number 1, 2, 3, 4, and what are the consequences, and why I'm asking what will happen if we don't do it, right? So you literally speak out whatever there is, because that is the transparency that the client needs to see and your team needs to see. So I think that works best for everybody.
When you and I spoke earlier, I was after we hung up, I remember thinking to myself that one thing that apparently hasn't changed in project management, regardless of what approach you use, what type of project you're on, is that a great deal of our job rests in delivering the ability to deliver news that people need to know, but they are so not thrilled to have to hear. So it sounds like that is one of the advantages that you establish for yourself, in part as representative of your team, but also as the point person, you establish that trust. And so when you do have to deliver news that they need to know in order to be able to take action, even though they don't like it, they're not going to react the same way to you as if they would if they didn't have that same level of trust in you.
Right. And also, like, I think the process begins much early because you have been conditioning their brain to get the news. So it doesn't come as a shock when you actually deliver the news. So that's
no surprises.
yeah, there is no surprises. You deliver that yeah, because you see it coming from a long way. It's never that, you know, a problem came on like out of nowhere. Like it's not like rain falling from the sky. There has to be clouds, right? And something. So basically you always see it coming from far, and having those what if scenarios and mostly have that documented. So I think if you communicate that if ever this happens, this could happen, so that is already conditioning them to receive that news, I think.
So planting seeds.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll say.
Now,
So,
I know this wasn't one of the questions. I'm sorry, go ahead.
well, it's okay. I'll be happy to answer whatever according to my perspective or from my experience.
So this wasn't one of the things that we talked about, discussing, but I'm kind of curious. Where do you see project management going forward? We're going to be in a much more virtual environment, which as project managers, we're actually, I think, more used to than many other folks. But where do you see this profession in 5 years?
So a lot of I did podcast before with the AI and PM. So I think I'm gonna steal some of my words from there. So I do know that in terms of, let's say, technical project management, a lot of the administrative work might be taken care of. For example, setting the reminders or sending emails to people that, hey, this, and this needs to happen by this, and this time. And then I know that, for example, Jira or there are many other PM tools that already have the integrated, let's take Scrum Master, for example. I mean, of course, now you know that there's a lot of blending that's happening between this project management role, this agile coaching, or different other processes. So I'm just going to combine them because I think everything falls under my line. So I think a lot of project managers might get a lot of assistance in administrative work. So, but then the focus still remains on, because of course the virtual teams, because as PMs, you normally do manage teams, let's say coming from I do it because different countries, different geographical, time zones and whatsoever. So in future, this trend will definitely continue. So for example, normally you see that in US or in Canada, there are this onshore teams, and then there are this offshore team, because some of the projects just cannot really afford like the downtime. For example, let's say it really does require, let's say, 24-hour support. I think it is a bit maybe challenging for different teams that are working in very different time zones to develop relationships, but I think it will still be nice. And more and more companies are looking at involving, let's say, the employee engagement activities for the virtual teams. Let's say they can have, a Zoom party or no whatsoever, or maybe have, once, let's say, COVID is over, they could get to meet each other like face to face, so they could build some sort of relationships. But yeah, of course, the trend will continue. Administrative work might be taken care of. But still, the influencing and the communication that project manager has to do, of course, with virtual teams, the effort is much more, because you cannot sense what they're feeling, let's say, about job satisfaction. Are they happy with the role that they are in? So those are the kind of things that you can sense if you are face to face with them in the office, right? But those are the kind of things maybe making it a bit challenging. But I think you are, as a project manager or in this line, if you do not define what are the standards, for example, let's say performance, right? What are the standards that are acceptable and what are not acceptable? And let's say we could forcefully, maybe like they say, like in Scrum, right? So they say like you keep on practicing it until you don't, I mean, follow the rules, then know the rules by heart and know their their meaning or their value, and then just never mind the rules. So I think maybe initially the teams might feel like, let's say for the first 2-3 years whatsoever, they might feel like this employee engagement or a game activity with different team members in different countries is useless, because it is, I need to accommodate them at a certain time, because everybody needs to meet at a certain point. So of course there is compromise on the schedule part. So I think eventually people will realize the benefit of it and might actually want it more. So that's I like to stay positive. So I think there is going to be embracing of working virtually and with different team members across the globe.
Well, I like the thought that the administrative burden would be lightened, that because it's never been my personal favorite. Sending out reminders is probably my least favorite. Sending
And
out
also,
meeting reminders, for example. Ooh.
yeah, so those ones, like, of course, I mean, a lot of it is actually already kind of taken care, right? If you look at it, and even like, I mean, Outlook even sends you like, how much do you engage with emails, how many numbers of emails you're sending, who are your top collaborators, stuff like that. So there's a lot already happening. For example, you no longer really have to do, I'm sure in your back in time, whenever you did your project management, you were doing this, variance from budget, variance from schedule, whatsoever. So those kind of things are already built into the
Thank
tools.
God.
Even right. So those are the, good formulas that you need to memorize. Sure, I do know them, how to do it, but if I do learn Microsoft Project, for example, I just input the values. Okay, now this was what expected. This is the variance at this time. So those are the formulas already taken care of. And if you look at the agile perspective, let's say Scrum of Scrum or the burn down, the release burn down. So all those things are already being taken care of. So that is good, I think. But of course, you should be inputting the right data, otherwise, and it is easy to, maybe fool around the system, but I don't know. I think there are some good lies, bad lies. Who knows?
So if I were to recap what you've seen over and over again as challenges, in many ways, if we were given the room to do it, and if we had advance notice of who we need to work with, we could actually use the suggestion that you made of building those relationships and building those trust levels. It's a little more difficult in a consultancy because we don't always know which account managers work we're going to be assigned. But building those relationships, not just with our teams, but also teammates, but also with the account managers and the clients directly, can in some ways make life a little bit more smooth as we go on, because those levels of trust will be maintained, which means that if as other problems occur in their businesses, they will trust us to come to them with solid solutions and execute well.
Yeah, I actually have personally experienced it. So like one project leads to another. So reoccurring business, right? So, and also like, I think the idea that the client is on one side of the wall and then the team is on other side of the wall, that wall needs to disappear, like completely. So yeah, I think that helps.
Jazz, you're always great to speak with, and I am so glad that you were able to make time. Ladies and gentlemen, one of the funniest things that happened was when she said, we were trying to schedule this, and normally my Calendly app doesn't have availability at certain hours of the day. And as I began to realize just how many more amazing people there are to reach out to, I extended it and I said, look, if the calendar app doesn't tell you that a time that you would prefer is available, just let me know, because anymore we're working very bizarre hours, and sometimes as project managers we're the ones who are accommodating that, so we end up living our lives in fits and spurts and sometimes naps and snacks instead of full night sleeps and meals. And I think Jazz is also a wonderful example of what it takes to make sure that you're not just a project manager, you're a team leader and you're a liaison and you're a representative for the client's best interests. Thanks so much, Jazz, for your time this morning.
Thank you so much, Kimi. It was nice being here. All right.